Hi, I'm Doug Doppler. It's my privilege to welcome you to Get Killer Tone in Church. Before we zoom in and talk about the specifics of what I'm going to cover on this DVD, I want to give you a word to think about, and that word is being relevant. God has a vision for your church that He shares with your senior pastor in terms of what you need to be accomplishing in your community. That vision gets passed down to the worship pastor and or worship leader. And our job on a Sunday morning is to support that process so God's presence can fill the house, and in turn, the man of God can bring the Word of God. Now, if we get that job wrong, it's usually not because of our talent, it's because of our heart. That is to say, it's all about our heart on a Sunday morning. Not really interested in skill set, I'm interested in the skill of your ability to bring the right heart for God, because that's going to speak to people in the congregation. Now that said, there's a lot of value in developing our skill set, so that's what really this DVD is about. So let's zoom in. The first thing we're going to address is kind of how our sound relates to the other things going on the platform and in the congregation via the 6 zones of sound. So that's going to be the first thing we're going to look at. Then we're going to address our signal chain, our guitars, our effects, amp speakers and cabinets, our little switcher boxes. Great stuff, lots of fun. And then at the end I'm going to deconstruct some guitar rigs so you can understand what I'm thinking as I pull these things together. Before we do that, I want to leave you with one last concept, and that is my belief that we need to be raising sons and daughters in the house. And a big part of that is developing a relationship, coming alongside people first. It's always better to come alongside somebody, develop a relationship, and out of relationship we can speak experience into their lives. Relationship first, experience second. Awesome. Let's get to it. One of the biggest challenges churches these days are facing is volume. And generally speaking, that problem originates back at the drum kit. And one of the most clever solutions I've seen put in place recently is replacing the snare drum and the bass drum with electronic drums. It's not an awful lot of fun to bash away on a pad there. And as an end result, it basically makes the drummer play at a level that is actually proportionate to the rest of the worship team and actually supports the worship leader, which is actually our exact same job definition. Regardless of whether the drummer's playing too loud or too soft, our job is to play it at a level that really supports the worship leader, and that's super, super important. So to aid that process, I've really tried to break down these 6 zones of worship for you. Zone 1 is the area right around our ears. And ultimately, that's the most important zone to really be conscious of as we try and develop our relative levels. So we're going to get to that in a second. Zone 2 is the area where we stand. Zone 3, the other area on the platform where the other musicians, those other folks, play. Zone 4 is the back wall where sound gets reflected off the platform and into Zone 5, the congregation. And ultimately, Zone 6 is where the sound gets mixed. Now, again, most guitar players are very aware of what goes on in Zone 2. The whole point of this section is to kind of raise the bar on our awareness of the other zones. So let's get to it. As I mentioned, Zone 1 is the area right around our ears, and is absolutely the best place for us to kind of begin to gauge our relative volume everywhere else in the congregation. For the sake of this conversation, I'm going to presume you guys are using Avium personal monitors, and because so many churches are using in-ear, either earbuds or in-ear monitors, whatever, we're going to start off there. First of all, if you're playing in mono, and I'm in stereo here, but if you're in mono, I'd suggest panning your guitar to the center and then panning the other things across the stereo spectrum so it's not all stacked up in the center. That way you get some separation. You can kind of begin to judge your relative volume. Is it too loud or too soft in one section of the song? Is it too bright? Is it too bassy? Too much effect? Too little effect? And in turn, as kind of the service goes its course and you're stepping on different pedals, listening to other things being, again, relevant to the other things that are going on. Is my relative volume good, bad? And that's really a great place to be able to make those decisions. Ultimately, Zone 2, where I'm standing, actually gives me very little information about potentially what the rest of the congregation is going to be hearing. So that's one of the key benefits to using in-ears. Now, if by chance I'm playing in stereo, instead of panning my guitar to the center, I'll put the amps on either side, pan the worship leader dead center, and then kind of put other things again across the stereo spectrum. Killer. Now, if I'm using a monitor, which is my personal preference, what I'm largely going to do is use the monitor to kind of add some extra volume to my guitar amps. So in particular, they're not making a huge amount of sound on the platform, and more sound is coming back at me than is going this way. And in terms of what I'm going to do to blend my in-ear monitor, or I should say the Avian monitor, what I'm going to do is mainly have my guitar and then anything else I can't really hear on the platform. And I'll finish that section up by saying this. If I'm using in-ears, I'm being really conscious to keep the volume down. My hearing is one of my most valuable assets on the platform, so I don't want to blast my ears out using in-ears. Similarly, if I'm using a powered monitor and amps, I'm always going to be wearing earplugs, but I'm not going to turn the volume up on my amplifiers just to compensate for the fact that I've got plugs in. We're always supposed to be relevant to the other things that are going on around us, which means we need to play support. Just because I'm protecting my hearing doesn't mean I get to get my yayas out with the volume. That's not a good thing. As I mentioned before, Zone 2 is the area where we stand, and it's obviously the area where guitar players know the most about their sound. Being purposeful of how I'm using monitors and amps is one of the most important things that I can bring to the praise and worship setting. So I'm going to speak out of my own experience. These days I'm playing out of two combos, 15-watt amplifiers. They're not super loud, and I don't have them turned up super loud. This is an orange Tiny Terror. It's got a single 12-inch vintage 30, and it's an open back combo. This, of course, is a Vox AC15. This has got a 15-watt Celestion Alnico Blue, and this is also an open back cabinet. Now, my preference is to use those two on the floor, angled in, triangulated with the monitor right at my pedal board, so there's kind of a sweet spot for sound. First of all, if they're angled in, they're not pointed out potentially at the worship leader. That's very bad. But I've got a spot where kind of all my sound kind of comes together. And I kind of have this golden rule of this 40-60 ratio. 40% of my sound, in church at least, I like to have coming from behind me, 60% coming from the monitor back at me. In turn, that same ratio I try and duplicate with the Soundman. That is to say, I want no more of my guitar volume than 40% coming from the platform, giving the sound guy at least 60% or more control of my volume. Again, 40% coming from the platform, 60% coming from the PA. Now I want to talk about the use of the monitor and the open back cabinets as they reflect sound off of Zone 4, the back wall. Your average PA has two very hot spots sound-wise, where the main columns reside, where the sound's really loud right there, really loud right there, and there's some dead spots right there. Now I'm not so much interested in terms of filling the dead spot as I am interested in bouncing sound off the back wall and reflecting that through the entire congregation. That makes for a more organic distribution of my guitar sound when it gets blended through the PA. Now again, 40-60, 40% from there, 60% from there, and this is cumulatively responsible for 40% or less of my guitar volume, giving the sound guy 60% control or more. And please remember, the sound guy is our friend because their finger is on your fader. So Zone 3 is everywhere else on the platform besides my little guitar corner there. This is one of the biggest blind spots for guitar players because we're pretty oblivious to what happens with our sound as it's bouncing around the rest of the platform. I can tell you one mistake definitely not to make. A minute ago I mentioned the concept of triangulating my sound in. I'm purposely not triangulating it out. One of the worst things you can do, especially if you even think about using a 412 cabinet on the worship platform, which is really generally a very bad idea, you never want to point your cabinet, any type of cabinet, period, at the worship leader, unless of course you are the worship leader. Again, if you've got a cabinet, it's very directional. Do not, I repeat, do not point that at the worship leader. Bad things will happen. Don't go there. Similarly, try not to point it at your senior pastor because he's going to get a disproportionate sense of how loud you are. Your average cabinet sends sound really pretty much straightforward, which again is one of the reasons I try and triangulate my sound here. By doing that, I'm not offending anybody else's sensibility on the rest of the platform, and they can get their own blend without having to fight with my guitar volume. That's invaluable. Zone 4 is one of those places that it's a blind spot, literally. You don't see it. And quite often as guitar players, because we're so absorbed in the sound, if we're not looking at it, we're not thinking about it. And the reflection off the back wall can really ruin a mix for a sound guy. So I'm very conscious of actually how I use the back wall. Now here's the thing, in some places reflecting the sound off the back wall is absolutely the worst thing that you can do. In other places it's going to save your hide. And in particular, I had an opportunity to play at a junior high school in Canada, and my ability to use the back wall is what saved me. And in that particular instance, I actually was using a 412 cabinet. And I was playing in an auditorium shaped like the shape of this table, where instead of the hall being long, it was wide. There were speakers here that were playing my background tracks. And I had a single 412 cabinet with a Marshall head right here in the center. And basically, I was going to deafen everybody with a sonic bazooka who was right in my immediate path. These are kids, mind you. And everybody else on the side was only going to hear the tracks. So in a matter of educated desperation, I got the idea of like, wow, let me just turn my amp around backwards, face it against the wall, and have it reflect through the entire area. And it actually worked great, fortunately. That may not work in all places, but it's a great option, so think about it. Zone 5, without fail, is the most important zone for us to try and pay attention to. Now that's kind of interesting because we're up here on the platform in Zone 2. How can I kind of know what's going on in Zone 5? Really good question. Well, first of all, be conscious of how much volume is coming out of Zone 2, how much is being reflected out of Zone 4, and most importantly, listening to what's going on in Zone 1. And the things you want to be listening for is my volume too loud or too soft in a particular song? Am I playing respectively to the dynamic range of the different arrangements? Very important. Keep listening. Now, in addition to listening, we want to use our eyes. Kind of every so often look over at the senior pastor, make sure he's not going. That's the sort of feedback our eyes will give us. And I think it's also important to address a couple of the other things about sound in the congregation. Because of the traditional PA, one speaker, another speaker, hot spot, dead spot, the worship experience is going to be different in just about every location out inside the congregation. And it's one of the things that makes the sound man's job very, very difficult, which is why Zone 2, we really need to focus on keeping our volume down. That way we can do our part to make the experience in Zone 5 the best possible. Arguably, the hardest job on a Sunday morning is the poor guy behind the mixing desk. As we talked about before, in Zone 5, the sound is different everywhere. And a sound person's job is to kind of walk around and listen to the sound of the different places in the room, in front of the mains, in between them, the dead spots. It's a nightmare, really. And if we make their job harder by having too much volume coming off the platform, we're taking a difficult job and making it nearly impossible. And the most important thing that I bring with me to the platform is my heart. One of the things about being a worship musician, whether we like it or not, we are on a platform. The spiritual atmosphere we create in the church is something that people will pick up on, whether it's verbalized or not. So we need to lead from a place of servanthood. Yeah, that's in the word, isn't it? In any case, being a servant means that we're a servant even to the sound team, which is one of the reasons I give them at least 60% of the control of my guitar volume front of house. Again, be a peacekeeper, because if for no other reason than the obvious one, their finger is on your fader. Well, hopefully that sheds some light on some of the areas that we're not necessarily seeing or kind of in our blind spots. To recap, Zone 1, where we hear things either through in-ear monitors or through our monitor, is at least where we can gather the information about what's happening. Zone 5, the most important place. Zone 2, we shouldn't make so much volume that it makes Zone 3 and Zone 6, the mixing desk, a nightmare. We need to learn to control the amount of reflection coming off the back wall and be purposeful about it so we can make things work on a Sunday morning. And remember, be a peacekeeper with that guy who's got his finger on your fader. Awesome. So before we actually start demoing the individual pieces of gear in the signal chain, what I figured I would do was kind of give you kind of the sum of the parts first. What I've got is a compressor, an analog delay, and two wonderful tube amplifiers. Let me just go ahead and play this. All right, you heard me play that piece before. What I'm doing is I'm utilizing the compressor to tighten things up a little bit. I'm using the delay to create an ambient space. I'm using the amps. They're set just on the edge of distorting, so I can, by using dynamics with my right hand, make it more distorted or clean up. Watch my right hand. I'm going to turn off the compressor and the delay. When I want it to be loud, I hold the pick tight and I hit hard. Makes the amps distort more. In the process, they become brighter, they become louder, and they become more distorted. When I lighten up with the pick, the exact opposite happens. It becomes a little bit more sensitive. I would say that one of the biggest mistakes guitar players make is they don't play enough dynamics with their right hand. So be conscious of that. Don't blame your gear for something you need to learn to do with your hands. Okay, well, I've spoken about how I'm making this gear function. Ultimately, I'm as interested in the parts as I am the sum, which is why we're doing this section. And I'll say, I'm doing some of the demos, some of the things I'm playing, I wouldn't necessarily play in church. Why is that? I need to have an idea of the range of things that a pedal or a guitar is capable of doing before I take a look at some of the individual spectrums I'm needing from that piece of gear. So I, again, try and keep the broadest range of things that I might potentially play on it, and again, look for things that I actually need. That's a really valuable process you want to apply towards everything. Now, that said, I'm looking for things with purpose. I'm not just kind of playing through pedals, kind of going, oh, that's a nice pedal, I kind of like that sound. I'm specifically trying to make it function within the framework of praise and worship, which is why at the end of the DVD, I'm going to deconstruct some guitar rigs, and I'm going to talk about what I was thinking with each piece of gear as I was kind of putting them together. Awesome. Let's get to the signal chain. As a worship musician, I have the privilege of traveling all over the world and playing with different worship teams. And usually I just show up with a guitar and, if I'm lucky, a couple of pedals. So for me, the guitar is the most important piece of my signal chain. And to that end, I will say it's probably a really, really good idea to find one instrument that you can play the entire range of stuff you need to do in a worship service, one guitar, and preferably have an identical, if you can afford to do so, hot swappable backup in case you break a string or something goes wrong. Now, the way I've set up these demos is I want to find the range of things that a guitar can do so I know that the individual spectrum that I'm needing for a particular song or a piece in the arrangement I'm able to do. And I've got three different things I'm going to do. One is just kind of a tight little kind of rock style rhythm. Number two is just playing a little lead line. And number three, I'm going to take the volume control down and do a little arpeggiated part. Now, I've got the amps set, as you already know, so they're breaking up just a little bit when I hit them hard. By taking the volume control down, it's telling me how that guitar is going to sound potentially plugged into a clean amp. That's really valuable. Awesome. Let's get to it. Because some of you are potentially just starting out on the electric guitar, either transitioning from acoustic or starting on the electric like I did, I wanted to take a moment and talk about some terminology so we've got that in common. This is the body. This is the neck. These guys are, of course, the strings, locking nut, headstock, tuning gears. Bridge, fine tuners, pickups, pickup selector, and volume control. Now I want to take a moment and talk about the pickups. This wide pickup is referred to as a wide aperture pickup, and generally speaking, wide aperture pickups are humbuckers, but not always. This right here is what's referred to as a narrow aperture pickup, and generally speaking, narrow aperture pickups are single coil. Humbuckers don't make noise. Single coils make a lot of noise. So that's one of the reasons you'll hear people talking about, oh, I got this humbucking pickup, man, it doesn't make any noise at all. And the thing about single coil pickups is they sound great, but you get underneath some lights, they really want to start buzzing. There are some solutions that we're about to talk about that kind of help us work around some of the problems associated with single coils, so let's get on to the guitars. This lovely instrument is an Ibanez AFS75T. Let's talk about the feature set. Two humbucking pickups. In the bridge here, I've got a DiMarzio EJ Custom bridge. This is an EJ Custom neck. EJ stands for Eric Johnson, and these are the pickups that he puts in his 335s to make them sound a little more Gretschy. Alright, the pickup selector in the down position is just the bridge pickup. In the middle position is both pickups. And in the upward position is the neck pickup. This is the volume and tone control for the bridge pickup, volume and tone for the neck pickup, and in the middle position, all 4 controls are active. All right, let's run through our little demos here. I'm going to turn everything all the way up, turn the delay off. Bridge pickup. Middle position. Neck pickup. Okay, back to the bridge pickup for some lead. Middle position. Neck position. Alright, we're going to go back to the bridge, bring the volume down, up to the neck. Bring the volume down, starting at the bridge pickup, our little arpeggiated clean part. Middle position. Neck position. What a beautiful guitar. What a great guitar. This is from my vintage Ibanez collection, circa 1975 or 76, and this obviously is a knockoff of a Telecaster Custom. What a great guitar. I'm also now using the wet pedal, great reverb pedal. I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to turn the compressor off so we can hear the true sound of the guitar. By the way, every single one of these demos, with the exception of kind of a little intro, is me and just the amp. There's no compression or anything else going on. All right, feature set. In the bridge position, we've put a Dvar Tonezone S. That is a narrow aperture humbucking pickup, so it's in better balance with the neck pickup where I put in a Dvar PAF Pro. The normal single coil that's here compared with the double coil there makes for a pretty serious imbalance between these two pickups, so I've solved that problem. Down, bridge pickup. Middle, both pickups. Up, neck pickup. This is the volume and the tone for the bridge pickup, volume and tone for the neck pickup. Let's run through our sound samples, and here we go. Bridge pickup switching to middle position. Neck position. Solo time. Middle position. Neck position. All right, we're going to take the volume control down, switch to the bridge for our little clean arpeggiated part. Middle position. Neck position. What a great guitar. Moving on. Another guitar from my vintage Ibanez knockoff collection. Wow, what a great instrument. Obviously, this is very much in the Strat world. I'm going to turn the wet pedal off and the compressor off. This is a DiMarzio Tonezone S, kind of the sister pickup to the DiMarzio Tonezone T. This is a narrow aperture humbucking pickup for the bridge position. Great sounding pickup. These are DiMarzio Virtual Vintage. I don't know the model number. I know that they sound great. Alright, this guitar's got a 5-way pickup selector. Number 1, bridge. Number 2, these two pickups. Number 3, this pickup. Number 4, both these pickups. Number 5, this one. This tone control here works for this pickup, and this tone control works for that pickup. At least I think so. The bridge pickup has no tone control. And one of the modifications I'm going to be making on this guitar is actually making this particular tone control active for the bridge. That's something that Eric Johnson does and Lincoln Brewster as well. If they're doing it, I'm going to be doing it too. Well, I don't do everything they do, but in terms of that modification for Strat, I'm definitely going to be doing it. Okay, let's run through the sound samples before I embarrass myself any further. That was, of course, the bridge pickup. Number 1 position, switching to the number 2 position. Number 3. Number 4. Number 5. Back to number 1 for a little lead. Number 2. Number 3. Number 4. Number 5. Alright, we're going to go to the bridge position, number 1 pickup selection. Bring the volume back. Arpeggiated guy. Number 2. Number 3. Number 4. Number 5. What a gorgeous instrument. Moving along. So this is another guitar from my lovely Ibanez Vintage Vault. Very Les Paul, isn't it? In fact, the neck feels just like a 1957 Les Paul. Great instrument. In the bridge here, I have a DiMarzio Super Distortion. Neck, I've got a PAF Pro, as I recall. Now, the pickup selector in the treble position is the bridge pickup. Middle position is both pickups, and for some reason, they call the neck pickup the rhythm setting. I don't quite understand. If this is treble, I would think that that would be, you got it. In any case, in terms of the controls on this instrument, it's wired a little different than a traditional Les Paul. This is the volume and tone for the bridge pickup, volume and tone for the neck pickup, and in the middle position, all these controls are active. Alright, making sure that the wet pedal and the compressor are off, which they are. I'm going to make sure everything's up, which it is now. Switch to the bridge position, and here is our little rock thing. Middle position. Neck position. Man, that sounds good. All right, back to the bridge position for a little lead. Middle position. position. Alright, we're going to take that volume down. Same thing. Up. It's over there. And here's our little arpeggiation idea. Middle position. Neck position. Or rhythm position. What a great guitar. Moving on. This guitar has gone with me all over the world, and on a recent trip to Canada, the headstock was broken, and fortunately my friends at Ibanez were kind enough to fix it for me. This guitar for me enables me to play just about anything that I need to play anywhere I need to play it. So it's a pleasure to be able to play this instrument. I just love it. In terms of the pickups, this is a DiMarzio Tonezone. I believe this is a DiMarzio 54 Pro, and this is a PAF Joe. One of the greatest neck pickups ever made. 5-way pickup selector, this is the bridge. Number 2 selection is both of these pickups. Number 3 is the middle one. Number 4 is both of these two. Number 5 is this guy. Volume, master volume for all pickups, and tone that's active on all pickups as well. Alright, so let's rock this guy out. I'm going to turn wet and the compressor off. Number 2. Number 3. Number 4. That was nice, wasn't it? That's 5. Lead. Number 2. Number 3. Number 4. Number 5. Alright, bridge position, bring the volume down. Lower arpeggiated line. Number 2. Number 3. Number 4. Number 5. Now, you may have noticed that this guitar doesn't react to those particular amps as well. There is a capacitor in between the volume and the tone circuit that affects, when you turn the guitar down, how it cleans up. And it's probably the wrong value for this particular setup, but the right guitar, especially all the way up. Number 4. Bring in a little bit of control here. Now, the interesting thing is that we ran all these tests on the guitars, and certain guitars were voiced in a particular way, did certain things well. But ultimately, I'm looking for tools that the guitar is going to offer me that when combined with the other things, I can get certain sounds. So now I'm just going to spend a little bit of time playing. Check it out. guitar for me is like coming home. Awesome. So in conclusion, that was a really interesting little exercise we just went through. One of the reasons that I wanted to just go straight into the amplifier without any of the other effects on was to really get a chance to hear the quality of the instruments. And quite often when you add effects and compression on top of a guitar, it will make it sound better. But the interesting thing is that one of the things as a musician and as an engineer and as a producer in the studio, I'm always ultimately interested in the end result. I don't really care what a guitar sounds like by itself. I care what happens when I begin to treat it with effects, when I begin to run it through an amplifier, how it interacts with the other things in the signal chain. And out of all the guitars that I just played, first of all, because of the 5-way switch and the 2 humbuckers and the single coil, I have the most versatility with this instrument. The capacitor that's in the circuit here is wrong for these amps. So if this was all I played all the time, I'd adjust that. But the thing is, ultimately you want an instrument that when you kind of put all the pieces of the puzzle together, works. And for me, this guitar is actually all about that. The other guitars, obviously, I love playing each one of those, and every guitar makes me do something different. But for praise and worship, ideally what I'm looking for is one guitar that I can use for the entire service, one that allows me to get all the colors and textures that I need to, and that does include effects, that does include the amplifiers, and so I try and look at the big picture. Now, one can argue that kind of what we did by just listening to the guitars through the amps, well, that was irrelevant because ultimately we stack all those things on there. I'd have to disagree in that we learn a certain amount about the characteristics of the guitar. For one thing, that revealed to me that if I just want to use this as my main setup, I need to change this cap that's in there. But that said, with everything all the way up, this guitar works perfectly, and that number 4 position there, man, that sounds good. So ultimately, you know, it just has to work for you, and ultimately has to work for your team. So again, by looking at the broadest range of things, we get the most information. Then we take what we've learned in that spectrum and then apply it to the other things and go, all right, wow, what's working, what's not working? And in this way, at least we're able to look at each individual piece of our signal chain and go, wow, what's happening here? What's happening here? And what's happening here? So to that end, now we're going to take a look at what's happening here with the effects. Let's have some fun. So that gets me to one of my favorite subjects, effects. Before I play through anything, I want to talk about my strategy in terms of signal chain. If I possibly can, I'm going to go to my tuner out of a separate loop so this guy isn't in line. And I like to do what's referred to as noiseless tuning. When I bring in the tuner, the rest of my signal is cut out. Ideally, it's nice to be able to run all the pedals in a loop as well, such that I can bring them in or out of line and then take the signal directly from my guitar to the amp from this box. Not necessary, but a nice option. Certainly gives you the ability to go straight into the amplifier and get that pristine relationship. Now, that said, from here, I'll go into the wah-wah. Compression. This is one of the places you can put a boost, overdrive, distortion, fuzz, modulation, delay, and reverb. Again, this is just one of the strategies on how to do this, but it's one that has worked for me numerous times. Some of the other places you can potentially put this boost pedal is either right here or right here, or at the very end for that matter. But again, I like it right before my overdrive, distortion, and fuzz. Okay, now, generally speaking, I use these 3 guys to kind of add texture because they kind of add ridges, hair to the sound. These guys over here kind of add a little bit of ambience, especially the delay and the reverb. And so those 2 kind of textures are really the things that I'm looking for. I'm looking for something that adds a little bit of hair, a little something that takes the amp and takes it over the edge, and in particular then something that adds a little bit of ambience. I rough it up and then I smooth it out. Again, kind of these diametrically opposing things, but again, it's strategic. I'm intending to achieve a certain goal. You don't have to use a wah-wah, but there are a lot of wah-wahs on the market right now, and if you're just kind of looking for a great place to start, I'd suggest starting with a Dunlop 95F, and that is a true bypass wah-wah with a facile inductor, and that's a really cool, very affordable wah-wah. On to the overdrive pedals. Welcome to the Doug Doppler Overdrive Party. I brought a couple of my friends. From visual sound, the Route 66. From radio, the Texas Bones. From Ibanez via Analog Man modded TS808. From Boss, the Keeley modified Blues Driver BD2. I'm running that all out into this Voodoo Lab switcher. Pedal number 1 corresponds with this light. pedal number 2 with this one, pedal number 3 with this one, and you guessed it, pedal number 4 with that. What we're actually going to do, no lights. We're going to start off with just the amp. Then we're going to go into pedal 1, which again is going to be the visual sound. Number 2, radial Texas Bones. Number 3, Analog Man modified tube screamer. And number 4, Keeley modified blues driver. Here we go, just the amp. Our little rock thing that you've heard before. Route 66. Texas Bones. Analog Man. Keeley. All right, let's shift over to the neck position and do some blues. Again, the amp by itself, then the visual sound, Texas Bones, tube screamer, blues driver. Here we go. Visual sound. Radial Texas Bones. Analog Man tube screamer. Keeley blues driver 2. Alright, now let's bring in a little reverb and make that real. Amp by itself. Visual sound. Radio. Analog Man tube screamer. Keeley blues driver 2. Alright, I'm going to turn the reverb off and do one last thing. Let me explain what it is that I'm going to do. I'm going to start off with the amp only, and I'm going to basically play a G chord and bring each pedal in and out. And what you're going to listen for is kind of what the voicing of each pedal is. Most of the time when a guitar player is playing a pedal or using a pedal, they're really focusing on this kind of this feel thing. What does it feel like when I'm playing the pedal? And it means that part of our ears gets a little turned off to the process because we're so busy kind of like, how's it feel? Well, let's turn the feel knob off and actually let's turn the listening knob all the way on. So again, here's the amp, and we're going to go amp, pedal. That was the visual sound. Here's the radial. Here's the tube screamer. And here's the blues driver. And again, what we're listening for is how bright is one pedal compared to the other. I'm going to do the same thing over. Now, what benefit does that do you or me? When I'm in a worship service, the songs are different. The dynamics are different from section to section. And one pedal may be appropriate for one song or one section where you might want to switch to a different pedal for a different song or a different section. And that sort of analysis of each pedal is really valuable. One of the other things you can begin to do is kind of go which pedals complement each other, and sometimes you can actually turn them both on at the same time so you can cascade the amount of gain from one pedal to the next. Awesome. Let's talk about distortion. So now I brought a few more friends. My buddy Mr. Saturator over here, some other cool little things, Vintage Big Muff, all sorts of great stuff there. But I'm not going to play through any of that. I'm actually just going to play through this little cool little OD20, Overdrive Distortion 20. It's got 4 little presets in it, and it's about the coolest pedal I've ever played through. Not because it's necessarily super high quality, but I was able to go in here and just come up with a bunch of presets within about 20 minutes, never having played through this pedal before. Ease of use for me is something that's important, probably for you as well. How does this relate to what we do? Very good question. Well, as a praise and worship musician, I often have to emulate the parts that are on a record, right? So I kind of have to do something called sound design, kind of find the appropriate tone, right amount of effects, so on and so forth. So the ease of use of this pedal kind of allowed me to kind of go into rock and roll land pretty quickly. So I'm going to go through a couple of different sounds here. I think you're going to recognize most of them. Awesome. Check it out. That, of course, is a Distortion Plus, a la Randy Rhoads. You won't necessarily be playing any Ozzy Osbourne in church, but if you wanted to, there you go. All right, let's flip on Eddie Van Halen. Eddie Van Halen there, and let's take a little trip back in time. If Jimmy were still alive, he'd be a Christian. Okay, moving right along. Doug Doppler Land, first record, 1995. That is a cool pedal. Welcome to Doug's Delay Party. On my right we have a vintage tube Echoplex, and this unit is beautifully spacious. It's just incredibly warm. This unit, of course, is an analog man, analog delay, and that's very ambient. And then here we've got the Boss DD7 digital delay, which is present, for lack of a better word. The thing is, each one of these is going to do something very different in the framework of the band once they start playing, and brings its own thing. So first of all, I'm going to let you hear the delay trail. That's the Echoplex, analog man, and the digital delay. Now, why would you want to have that kind of ambient analog delay sound where it's kind of muddled? Because it's ambient and it's cool. All right, let me run through the different sounds here. We're starting off with the Echoplex. All right, the analog delay. And last but not least, the Boss DD7. Now, why do I have the DL4 in front of me? Because guess what? All of these types of delays are modeled inside here, and with each of the little presets here, you can switch between each one of them at the touch of a button. Pretty cool. That's the end of the delay. Welcome to the wild, crazy world of amps, speakers, and cabinets. The funny thing is, the only thing that people can really hear out in the audience or in the congregation coming off the stage is your speaker. Generally speaking, we spend a lot of time investing in our guitars, our effects, our amplifiers, and probably spend the least amount of time, energy, and resources on our speakers. If you listen closely, you're going to hear some white noise. The white noise just changed. Take a listen. Okay, what you're hearing is the noise from my lovely Marshall JVM head coming out of this side. These are 25-watt greenback Celestians coming out of a Dragoon cabinet. Those cabinets are really cool. There's panels on the back. You pull the panels off, open back cabinet, put them up, close back cabinet, projecting a lot of sound forward. On the other side here, These are Century Vintage. 25 watt Celestians, 100 watt Celestians. Take a listen to the difference. Wow, night and day. So just think about how much difference a different speaker can make. Check them out, try them out. Work with closed back cabinets, open back cabinets. When we get to taking a look at this little rig I've put together here, you're going to hear how big a difference it is to have one side with closed back and the other side with an open back. Amp speakers and cabinets. The speaker. The microphone. This guy, when I'm using a speaker on stage, gets put right on the edge of where the cone meets the paper. I'll point this guy right on like that, straight on axis there, and I will point that microphone at that spot through the grill and put the mic right up against the grill. Now, why do I do that? That is the sound of what more or less it sounds like when you're playing around this little area, zone 2. If I point it right towards the center there, very unpleasant, very sharp, bad for everybody. This spot right there is the way it sounds, really kind of you're hanging out ambiently hearing it. That is the closest I've ever been able to come to getting it to sound quote-unquote right, front of house in terms of what I'm hearing on stage. Killer. Now again, this guy, I put it right up against the grill because if it gets knocked away, as I'm playing I can gently just kind of push it back there, or if it's on the ground I can kind of nudge up against it with my leg. That's something I've done all over the world. It works. You should do it too. Well, every guitar player really wants one thing: control. And we've got it. I'm in the process of making yet another DVD called Get Killer Tone Effects, and I've really been blessed to have amazing support from all these manufacturers. And so I wanted to take a moment and share some of the cool devices that are available to you. Radio is a Canadian company, and they make great gear. You already heard me using the cabinet switcher, as I switch back and forth between those cabinets with the JVM. This is a head switcher, so it allows me to use one cabinet and two different heads. Pretty cool stuff. This is Layla stuff. It's made in Germany, and as you can imagine, it's pretty high quality. I love this stuff. It works great. Basically, if you need to switch between guitars or amps or bring in loops, great stuff. Now, a number of their devices actually have a little button that allows you to bring in a buffer. And this is important. A buffer allows you to either have a nice solo boost, hey, everybody needs one of those, or what it does is on long cable runs, it allows you to bring that signal up a little bit so you don't lose high end or volume along that run. Similarly, Radial has the SGI. And this is the transmitter, the TX, and this is the receiver, the RX. And a little earlier, I was talking about kind of something I played that was kind of reminiscent of Randy Rhoads / Ozzy Osbourne. I like to have a little bit of fun, and if I offended anybody, I apologize, but I'm going to go a step further. Motley Crue. There you go. I said Motley Crue and Ozzy Osbourne in the same Praise and Worship DVD. The reality is there's a lot to be learned from the secular, and if we close ourselves off from that, it's our loss. And we, of course, lose the ability to be relatable. And being a relatable Christian is something that, for me, is very important. What does that have to do with this? Well, the guitar player in Motley Crue, Mick Mars, uses these. And on a recent trip to Australia, I had the privilege and the blessing to get a chance to spend some time with Nigel from the Hillsong team, who's a huge inspiration to me and has become a friend, which is pretty amazing. He invited me to come back to the amp room underneath the stage at Hills, and lo and behold, these were there. What do they do? Good question. Well, this is, first of all, the transmitter. Pedal board up on the stage. Cable goes into the transmitter. This sends out a signal along a balanced XLR that goes down into the amp room, where the receiver then changes that back out into a 1/4 inch. And basically makes it so a long run is running along a balanced XLR, so you don't lose high end, you don't lose volume. These are incredibly hip, great stuff. Not cheap, but great stuff. All right, Voodoo Lab is a company that's very close to where I live. And these guys rock. They've just been amazing. This little guy here is the looper that you saw me using for a bunch of the demos that you saw here. And this guy, the commander, was down there on the floor. And they talk to one another via a MIDI cable. And basically I can kind of turn this one on and kind of associate it with this preset, turn this one on, associate it with this preset. Really easy to program. Even a guitar player can do it. Hey. All right. let's go to the high-end stuff. Although this is high-end in quality, let's go like to the next level. And these guys, by the way, make something very similar to this. This is a Loop Patchmate 8 by Rocktron, and this is the all-access limited controller. Basically, this has 8 separate loops, and it has MIDI, and I can store any combination of loops. I can send and receive from the effects loop of an amp. I can send to the amp. I can change channels. I can put different stomp boxes back in here and associate them with the loop. And in turn, this guy kind of switches presets and kind of brings stuff up on command. This is very cool stuff. It's not cheap, but it's extremely well made. And I had the privilege this past summer of going out on tour as a support act for Michael Schenker. And this is the rig that I took with me. And it worked flawlessly every night. And you know, as a praise and worship musician, obviously I don't want my rig going down when I'm on the platform. That would be very bad. And similarly, you know, when I'm out on tour, I also don't want my stuff to fail. The moral of the story is use high quality gear. All of this, top notch. That actually gets me to one other thing. Cables. I only use DiMarzio cables. They are expensive. They are amazing. And I've never, repeat, never after 10 years, ever had a single one break. That's pretty cool stuff, and they sound great. All right, well, enough control. Let's move on. So, at the beginning of this DVD, I mentioned that we were going to be deconstructing some setups. And this is great stuff. And hopefully, over the course of this DVD, we've gotten to know one another. And out of that relationship, I can speak some words of experience-based advice. These are effects. And these are boxes. And this is the original owner's manual that came with this box and this effect. Now, as haggard as this 80s vintage DS1 might look, imagine what it would look like if it had been separated from that box. As a collector, this box and the original owner's manual is valuable to me. As a player, it's especially valuable to me because I want to know what they were thinking as they designed this pedal. And you should too. Similarly, new pieces of gear, read the owner's manual and keep them in the box when you're not using them, and put the lid on the box to keep dust from getting in there. As a praise and worship musician, I have a responsibility on a Sunday to make sure that I can do my job. And if my gear breaks because I didn't take care of it, I'm not doing my job. Similarly, read your owner's manuals. This Pod X3 Live is the first piece of gear I'm going to demo, and I'm going to run out of it into the effects return. Actually, I'm going to go into the power amp in of this combo here, a Roland JC120. If I had not read the owner's manual, I would not have known that there are different output settings for this, like into the front end of a stack, or into a combo return, or into the front end of a combo. And it's going to change the way this unit outputs the sound. If you don't read the owner's manual, you won't know that. And if people give you that funny look, it's the brow, it's the look of being perplexed as to what is that sound coming out of the PA, and why are you doing it? That's a look you don't want to be on the other end of. I've been there. You don't want to go there. In any case, know your gear so you can do the best possible job for God. And at the end of the day, we can all just kind of go, wow, this is great. Because really what my goal is, I want to make it better. So the first place you can start to make it better is know your gear, take care of it, and, you know, let's just get to it. Let's have some fun. Let's run through some setups. The Pod X3 Live is an amazing piece of gear. You can run it straight into the PA. You don't have to have any speakers or amps on the platform. If you're using in-ears, this is a great solution. And the worship team at my home church, I travel a lot, so I'm not really serving regularly on the team right now, but they didn't have a guitar player, and they desperately needed somebody to play. And they were like, Doug, are you in town? Can you play, please? And I was like, well, of course I'm going to play. What else would I do? So there are no amps on the stage anymore, no speakers on the stage, no guitar monitors. It's all in here now, which is not necessarily my favorite thing, but I'm like, hey, that's how things are done. I'm on board. What do I need to do? So I borrowed the X3 Live, borrowed the manual, spent about 4 hours learning the songs and dialing up a bunch of presets that I knew were going to work within the framework of our PA, again, knowing Zone 5, and the frameworks of the songs, just knowing the arrangements, dynamics, and all those things. So let me briefly kind of play through some of the sounds here. First of all, this. It's kind of a beautiful ambient, cascading delay reverb we used for one of the songs we played. And then here is kind of the related strumming part that I came up with to go along with that. Those parts, or I should say those presets, really gonna go very well from one to the other. Tonally, they match quite well. And dynamically speaking as well. Now let me step down into this next bank here. A louder song, obviously. There's kind of the more chimey thing. Next preset over. It's kind of my chorus preset. Verse. Chorus. Right next to that one, I've got a second preset that's voiced just a little bit differently. If the song changes dynamics from one section, like the verse to the chorus to the bridge, I might want to use a slightly different preset that I'm using on the chorus when I get to the bridge. That way it kind of has a little bit of expansion in the guitar parts. Again, think about this being the verse, this being the chorus, this being the bridge. So I get a little bit of a lift when I get to the bridge. Not too much, but again, those parts work well together. And as I'm doing basically what I refer to as sound design, I'm thinking about how these presets are going to work in the framework of the PA. So I spent about 4 hours, again, going through the CD, learning the parts, and then dialing up these sounds into the back of not this amp, but another combo. And again, by knowing how this thing works, I've got the output set for a combo, such that when I actually ran this thing straight out into the PA, I knew what the sounds were going to sound like. That's really important, being able to judge when you're rehearsing what it's going to sound like when you end up on Sunday morning playing the actual songs in the actual room. Because most of the teams that I know don't actually rehearse in the same place they do worship on a Sunday. So that's a real challenge to kind of get your sound set up. So again, Zone 1 is really where we learn what we need to be doing, so we know in Zone 5 we're doing the right thing. Awesome. On to the big amps. So that gets us to the Orange Special. On my right, an 8030 into an Orange 212 closed back cabinet with vintage 30s. That's kind of my tight sounding rhythm side. On my left, I've got the Thunderverb 200 going out into another Orange 212 cabinet, but because this is kind of my more airy side, a little bit more on the Voxy end of things, this is an open back cabinet, and that sounds like this. Okay, now in the front end, I've got my Dynacomp. That's in. I've got my Analog Man analog delay. That's in. I'm using my Layla switcher here to go between that amp, and both amps. All right, so let's take a listen. All right, well that is really cool. And let me talk just very briefly about what it is that I'm trying to do. Tight side, a little brighter. Loose side, a little bassier. And the two of those together, once you add the drums and the bass on the bottom, the cymbals on the top, the snare drum over the whole thing, and the vocals over the top of all of that, it's going to sit really well in the framework of a band. Great sounding amps. Awesome. So that gets us to the not so bittersweet ending. It's really been a privilege being able to serve you. I encourage you to take this information, that which you find valuable that is, and share it with those that you love, those on your team. And keep in mind that this information is not intended to be buried in a field, but passed on. And keep in mind, of course, now that we have a relationship, that we speak to people from relationship first and experience second. And I really hope that you're blessed with some of the stuff that you've learned here, and that I hope that it serves you and your team well. God bless.